Hi and welcome to this week's poetry study, and we're looking at the great T.S Eliot. He is probably one of my favourite all-time poets, way up there with Yeats and Sylvia Plath. But Eliot certainly got me thinking about poetry in a completely different way, and I'm hoping that he'll do the same for you. Eliot went on to create some of the masterpieces of the 21st century. He went on and won the Nobel Prize in 1948, and he died in 1965. He wrote some absolutely amazing poems, from the Lovesong of Alfred Profrock, which we're going to take a look at, The Wasteland, and Four Quartets. So let's go way back to the beginning. Thomas Stearns Eliot, and he ended up using the name T.S. Eliot for his works, was born on the 26th of September 1888, and he, as I said, he died in January 1965. He was a poet. He was also an essayist, a publisher, a playwright, a literary and social critic, and one of the 20th century's major poets, as I said. He was born in St. Louis, Missouri, to quite a conservative Yankee family, and later in his life his more religious thoughts and ideas came through in his poems. He then emigrated to England when he was 25 and ended up becoming a naturalised British subject at the age of 39. Eliot was one of the forerunners of the modernist movement, which I'm going to ask you to look up later on as part of your assignment for this work. He attracted widespread attention to his poem, The Lovesong of Alfred Profrock. Some considered it absolutely outlandish and crazy because it was such a departure from what was considered, pure poetry that rhymed and had a type of a structure, whereas Eliot's poetry moved away from all of that. And again, we're going to have a look at that in a moment. So the Lovesong of Alfred Profrock, and it happens to be raining at the moment, which is kind of significant because this poem was the beginning of Eliot's career as a really influential poet. It's a kind of dark and gloomy piece, but it's an interesting piece, and the writing and the description and the allusions and the imagery in this poetry is fascinating, is really what I want you to look at. So let's take a look at some of this poem. It's quite a big piece, and it took him nearly 5 years to write it, and I'm not surprised because it's a really interesting piece of work. So let's just take a look at this piece, and we're going to highlight along the way. So let us go then, you and I. And to me, that line suggests that he wants to take us on a journey with him when the evening is spread out against the sky, and that just gives you such an illusion of the darkness of the night, like a patient etherized upon a table. So if we think about someone who etherized is, ether is an old term for anesthetic, and so we're considering someone who's laid out unconscious on a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels. It's not a pretty picture if you think about it. Already we're sort of thinking about him perhaps feeling a little bit lonely or a little desolate, sad, even possibly depressed. And sawdust restaurants with oyster shells, streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent, to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. So he's pondering it and leaving us with a question. He's leaving us with something to think about and to ponder about and it's thought-provoking, and it's evocative. And this is what this whole poem and this modernistic style of writing is about. So before we move on to the next part, I want you to start thinking about the imagery in the poem and in the words. I want you to think about the pictures that it evokes in your own mind. I want you to think about the tone and the theme. And I want you to think about the language, how it's written, how some of the words run together to make it gives it even more interesting appeal. So I want you to consider all of those things as we continue on. So the next part says, in the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. He's kind of saying that, they're a little bit pretentious, these people. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes. And it just makes us think about a cat sort of slithering along, the edge of a window as they do. They kind of rub their back against it, and it just makes us feel a little sleepy and a little tired and lazy as well. The yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes licked its tongue into the corners of the evening. I love that line. Licked its tongue into the corners of the evening. It makes us sort of think about it, tasting it, and it's, again, multi-sensory. Lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. Again, there's this whole cat imagery that's going on here that makes us think about how a cat might move and brace itself and all of that kind of stuff. So adding on to the other things that I asked you to think about, what I want you to do is then go one step further. What are the pictures? Do you get the cat thing like I do? Or does it evoke something else? How does it make you feel? And what does it make you think? Poetry is a very sensory piece of writing. It's meant to evoke images and feelings and thoughts and ideas, and it's meant to move us on some level. So like many of Eliot's poems, the Lovesong of J. Alfred Profrock makes numerous allusions to other works which are often symbolic themselves. So what that means is that he alludes to other artists and other writers, and they then become symbols in themselves. So we need to kind of study beyond his words, and then we look at other people's words and what were they meaning, and what were they alluding to when they were writing their pieces. So it sort of makes us extend ourselves beyond just the piece that's in front of us. For example, at the very beginning of the poem is a piece that's by Dante, and it's I found this in Wikipedia, and it's been translated for you. If I but thought that my response were made to one perhaps returning to the world, this tongue of flame would cease to flicker. But since up from these depths no one has yet returned alive, if what I hear is true, I answer without fear of being shamed. Now, there's some ideas in the Wikipedia about, why he perhaps might have used Dante's Inferno, but I want you to think about why you think that he used that piece, and how is it relevant to Profrock? What does it mean? And the fact that he had at the very beginning of the poem set the tone. So what does that mean to you? So it's kind of gleaning meaning from even the position of where something is placed within a poem as well. So let's move on. So here are your assignments. I need you to read the entire poem. I need you to think about the things that I've asked you already to think about. I need you to think about why Dante's piece is in there. And also research more on T.S. Eliot and look at his other poems as well and see how significant they are to the rest of the work. And finally, you can get together with somebody and do this if you like. I want you to go through the first two parts of the poem that I have given you and come up with your own ideas additional to mine and your own thoughts about what the meaning, what all of those things mean. And also then talk about how it makes you feel and what it makes you think. And bring that back to class, and we're going to have a class discussion about the whole thing. So have fun with this, enjoy the pace, and really get your teeth into this. This is fantastic writing, and I want you to embrace it. It might seem a little offbeat and a little kooky and a little bit weird to what you're used to, but I think you'll relate to it once you get into the words and the meaning and kind of, think about how you can relate it even back to music of the day. Okay, let's go and have fun.